Welcome to Steward Leaders, a podcast for leaders who understand that our leadership is not about us. I'm Eric Alexander. In these conversations, we explore what it means to lead as stewards, living our leadership for something bigger than ourselves. Listeners, thanks for joining us today, and hello to you too as well, Scott Dueser. I'm so grateful you've made time for a Steward Leaders conversation.
It's certainly my pleasure to be with you today, and I appreciate the opportunity to do it.
I'm grateful you're here. Listeners, you're going to enjoy this. Let me tell you a little bit about Scott. He's what I would call a Texas banking icon. I didn't tell him I was going to call him that, but as a former banker with a fraction of the years of experience, I can tell you the perspective that I have and from around the state about Scott and his bank. He's been in banking, I think, 55 years. He told me 50 years last month at First Financial in Abilene, Texas, where he's been in the leadership. You were in the CEO seat for like 36 of those years. If I did the math right.
Yes.
And chairman now, executive chairman. And let me just tell you a little bit about the bank. Last I checked, about 15 billion in assets. And a few more things from his bio. Texas Tech graduate back in the mid-'70s, and then later came back in a prominent leadership role in the Board of Regents. Also, Southwestern Graduate School of Banking. You were in one of the earlier classes, graduate of '81. I was down there 2 weeks ago teaching the newer students. And if I'm remembering right, about 10 years ago or so, they honored you as a distinguished alumnus of that banking school. So, Scott,
Right.
So glad to have you.
Good to be here.
Anything you want to elaborate on about your background?
No, you did a great job.
I love this.
If we say anything else, it becomes boring.
I don't know. You were telling me an interesting story right before we got on about how you got into banking, where a bank
It is
president
an
sought you
interesting.
out and you ended up in a different role than you were thinking. You want to tell that story quickly?
I will.
Okay.
I worked on a ranch in high school, and so we were doing a little bit of everything that you do on a ranch, but one of the things that we did a lot of is building fences. And I got a call my senior year in high school from the president of the bank, and he said, "Would you go to work for me?" And I immediately thought of air conditioning and and clean clothes. And I said, "Yes, I will." And I thought he'd call me because, I was top of my class. I was um, a good looking in those days and had a great personality. And that's not why he called me. He had been on the ranch and seen the fences we were building, and he wanted me to build fence for him. And so that's how I got in the business. Well, interesting story. I tell that in new employee orientation
Mm,
because this moral of that story is no matter how mundane you think a job is, do it with excellence because
yes.
somebody's watching.
Right.
And I tell them here at the bank, somebody's watching
Hmm.
because they want to advance people that do a good job. And if you're
Hmm.
doing a great job, they want to advance. And that's a great story because
Hmm.
if I hadn't gotten that call, there's no telling what I'd be today.
Right.
And
Right.
so I walked in the bank the first day and he said, "I'm going to make a banker out of you." And I've never worked anywhere else but a bank since then.
That's great. Love that story. The seemingly mundane gets you a toe in, teaches you about hard work. People are
Mhm.
paying attention. That's great. Love that. I want to talk a little bit more. You've been on my radar since I got into banking back at Happy, and First Financial, widely respected as a bank that a lot of other banks want to emulate. Earnings are hit regularly and historically strong. Your valuation multiples always so strong. So you've been in banking in a while, but you've not just been dabbling with it. You all have been, from my perspective, doing an amazing job taking care of clients and creating shareholder value. Scott and I most recently ran into each other at the conference in Dallas back, I think it was in April, where I
Yes, it
heard
was.
you speak. You gave a keynote on culture, probably some other topics in there too. Really captured my attention. We may talk a little bit about that in a second episode. I was also there at the conference, getting to participate in a panel discussion on bank M&A war stories, but getting to hear you in a technical world talk about some of the less technical but super important aspects of leadership, aspects of banking, aspects of stewardship got my attention. I thought, we've got to have an extended conversation.
That's cool because I loved your session because I learned so much from it. And as many acquisitions as I've done, there's always more to learn,
It's always more to learn.
especially
It
on the
was a
accounting side because it's
That's
constantly changing.
It's constantly changing. And I'm very grateful we had a CPA on there. I'm a CPA, but somebody who's currently actively doing all the accounting side of the acquisitions. The part that fascinates me more is the people and the leadership and the deals and the integration and all the really hard, soft stuff that's vital for creating value. But
It can be fun.
here's what I'd like to talk about. I'd
Okay.
like to talk about stewardship in banking, especially for the leaders at the very top of the organization. And when I say in banking, it's because you've got over half a century in, that sounds like a long time when you say it that way. You've got a lot of experience in leadership in banking. Of course, the principles you'll be talking about are applicable in any setting. But when I bring up stewardship, what does that mean to you? And then we'll explore a little bit about implications and applications in banking and bank leadership.
Well, when you look at life, you're just a steward, and stewardship is an important part of it. We don't come in with anything, and we don't leave with anything. And think about that is we only are working with what we have, and it's not ours, really, even though we may say, oh, that's my assets, that's my balance sheet, or that's my bank. It's really not ours. We're a steward the whole time. And it's how we take what we've got and enhance it and make it better. And so, stewardship comes down to how we treat our customer service, how we look at our customers. Our smallest customer to me is as important as our largest customer. And you got to have both,
Right.
and you got to give them both great service. The other thing, you being a steward is also the fiduciary duty that you have uh, to your customers, to your stockholders. We are huge on looking at what's best for our stockholders, not what's best for me, you know, but what's best for our stockholders, down the road. Is acquisition good for them? Is it not? And we look at, is it good for our customers? Is it good for the community? Is it good for our stockholders? And is it good for our employees? And if it meets yes on all those, that's when we want to do it. And so that's just part of stewardship for me is you're given something, you got to enhance it, and you're not going to take it with you. You're going to leave it to somebody else.
Right. And leave it in better shape than you found it.
Oh, yes, for
And that,
sure.
that whole principle of you have multiple constituencies that are affected by it. So you're not focusing just on one, but how do we balance the needs and interests of all the people that are affected by what we're doing here?
It's got to be equitable. I'm big on being equitable to people, whether it's across the board, whether it's all the different categories that you're dealing with, because you can do something for one that you don't do it for another and it hurts the other. And so, again, I look at all those four constituents that we're a fiduciary of and making sure that they're all taken care of. I love the trust business because that's a huge fiduciary, business. It's something that I really enjoy in the banking industry because, again, you're sitting down and you're helping people accomplish what they want to accomplish. In lending, you do it in trust and wealth management, but you're taking what they have and enhancing it for a better life for them, for a better life for their family. You're working on estate planning, making sure that they're doing the right things and making sure the next generation is going to benefit from it. One of the things that I really am focused on today is generational customers. And the more I work on that, the more I like it, and the more that we need to be looking at generational customers. And when I talk about generational customers, we have customers that have banked with families that have banked with us for over 100 years. We're 136 years old, and we have had families all that 136 years that are still with us.
That's
What are the
amazing.
concepts that they have to be a generational customer? One, they banked with us.
Hmm.
Two, we handle their wealth management and their trust. We've settled estates for them. We've been the executor. And three, they own our stock. And those things are the things that make them lifelong, but more than lifelong, generational. And you got to always know the kids. Always got to know
Right.
the grandkids. So as bankers, we need to be thinking generational because that's that group that you're going to keep. Yes, you always want to be getting new customers and building on what you've got, but why lose what you've had for years because you want to go you want to have that next generation. And
Hmm.
so knowing that next generation, working on that next generation, and being the steward for them and the fiduciary for them is very important.
And if you fail to do that at any point along the way,
It
the
goes by the wayside.
reason for somebody to stay on through another generation or through the current generation is damaged.
Say you're handling a $30 million estate and the kids all come in and take it to their respective places, all of a
Hmm.
sudden you lose $30 million. But if you know those children, if you've been working with them and you've been helping them start on their estate planning and doing their things, and you're the one that's talking through, yeah, do you want to make that investment or you not want to make that investment? If you've been their advisor that whole time,
Hmm.
they're going to keep it with you. And so that's you gotta look at the generational side of it.
And the trust that has to be there for that to happen is significant and does
Hmm.
not just happen by accident.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It's a relationship,
Hmm.
and banking is all about a relationship.
I like where you started with a broad definition of stewardship because it really it applies in any industry in any role. As I think about banking, well, let me back up this way. I tend to come to it from where I was serving in banking, which was CFO, the finance role. In my view, that's definitely finance is a stewardship responsibility for sure.
No question.
But then as I expand it, every leadership is a stewardship responsibility. But then in a bank, the bank itself is a steward. In a trust function, we are entrusted with assets that we're managing on somebody's behalf. We are holding deposits that people parked with us for a short time or a long time. It's not our money.
Mhm.
We have
No,
shareholders that have placed an investment in us. And it just, everywhere I look on the balance sheet, everywhere I look on the income statement, on the other side of that number, there's a person. And it's not mine.
that's right. That's right. And you're responsible. You have that fiduciary duty to make
Right.
sure that they do well.
So I want to ask, kind of go practical application direction for a minute. We'll talk about leadership, top of the house, a little more specifically in a minute. But
Hmm.
as you started talking about banking, you went directly and I think appropriately right to the customers you're serving. There are a whole lot of folks inside the bank that are like my shop. We were one or two removes from talking to the customers. I don't
Hmm.
like people, and the CEO didn't want me talking to people. I'm exaggerating, but we were not in direct contact with the customers all the time. Is the stewardship just for those on the front line taking care of the customers?
Not at all. You look at your position, those numbers are extremely important. And they're important for the customer. They're important, for the stockholder. They're important for your employees, and
Hmm.
they're important for the community because we've got to have strong banks or the community that is not strong. And I've lived through that where I watched during the oil bust, I watched
Hmm.
every other bank in Abilene fail or be recapitalized. That is a scary time. And you have a fiduciary duty to your community
Hmm.
to keep that bank strong because is what makes strong communities.
We could then go on and talk about other functions too. We could talk about IT. Our
Yes.
customers are depending on those systems being up. We can talk about HR. Our customers are depending on us having good folks in house to take care of keep the ship running. And so in a way, I know I lobbed you a softball question, but I love not overlooking those internal back office functions too that
Oh, they're
sometimes
they're
we don't
extremely
think about.
important. And I call it inside and outside customers. They
That's how I
are
did too.
You have inside customers that you got to take care of so they can take care of the outside customers. Because
Exactly.
if you don't do your job, they don't do theirs well. Those numbers have to be good. They have to be right. They have
Right.
to, and that's what you're presenting to the stockholders. So the stockholders have to have that confidence in you, and you have that fiduciary duty to make sure they're right. Same
Right.
thing about technology. I mean, if you get somebody that breaks into the system and you're down for 2 or 3 days, that's horrendous. You can't afford to have that happen.
I was standing at a bank teller line one time needing a cashier's check to go close on a house, and it was right after a system conversion had happened. And right next to me, it was one of those instances you can't help but overhear something that's not intended for you to hear when it's going on next to you in the teller line, next teller over, where somebody was now 2 or 3 days into not being able to see any activity in their account, being blind on what's going on. I had enough knowledge of what was flowing and enough cushion in my operating account that I wasn't fretting, I wasn't panicking, but people didn't know if their paychecks were hitting. They didn't know if they had the funds there to cover their next rent bill. And when those internal structures aren't functioning, there's a real price, and it's paid by our customers, our
It is. It
communities.
is. And there's a lot of stress. And, I take that stress on when somebody else
Yes.
has it.
Well,
And again, it's that fiduciary duty that I have to make sure that doesn't happen.
right. That's a good way to think about that, where you know that there's that risk. We need to be planning ahead and mitigating and not just scrambling when it hits. So you say you take that on, which actually leads to where I wanted to go next is
Okay.
in the leadership roles. So you've served at the top of the house as the CEO. You're now serving in the executive chairman. You've been in the senior leadership roles for a long time. Specifically, practically, how does the stewardship mindset inform how you approach that and how other leaders should?
Well, I think my comment was very on track. Is that I feel it. I tell my employees, if you don't think your job's on my shoulders, it is, and I wear it every day because I have to make sure we're doing the right things, or you're not going to be here. I've always said, if we ever had to sell the bank, half of our people are going to be gone because that's what happens when you sell a bank is, all the back room goes away. And so,
I've experienced that.
yes,
Yes.
yes. And so, the better we do, the less chance we ever have of being sold. And so, we're all on the same team to do that. And there are reasons to sell banks, and there's a reason to build a bank up and sell it and make the money. And I think that's what y'all did. I think you did a great job of it at Happy, and I think you sold to a great company.
It's a good
So,
outcome.
and those things that's the natural course of business for us. Being here 136 years, that's not something we have a young management team.
Right.
We want to keep going. Now, if you don't do well, that could change that. And if you're not returning to the stockholders, they're going to sell you. If they can have a better return by you being owned by somebody else or make a lot of money, and that's what we're about. That's that stewardship. Because if somebody walked into the bank today and said, "Hey, I'm going to pay you twice what the market's paying you today," yeah, I'd I'd have to I'd have to take it to the board, and we'd probably do that, you know. But it would return a lot to our stockholders, just like Pat did to yours. You guys did a great job. A lot of people made a lot of money,
A lot of people made a lot of money, a lot of wealth creation through the
a
years.
lot of wealth creation.
So I want to touch on something you brought up there, the weight, also we've got to perform. We as a bank have to perform, which means you and the leadership team have to perform, which means employees, we've got to perform. I've encountered situations sometimes where when I'm talking about stewardship with people, we can have an impression of that means I need to just take something that's been entrusted to me and hunker down, and my responsibility is just to protect it and make sure it's not harmed.
Right.
I, I'll pontificate here for a minute, but my view is we do protect it, but we're also protecting and enhancing its fruitfulness. You started with that. We've been entrusted with something, we want to enhance it for the future. We have to balance, we don't want it damaged, first do no harm, but at the same time, we want it to flourish. And there's, just like balancing the different constituencies and our responsibilities to them, the protecting and the flourishing, they're not incompatible, but it adds complexity to what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, and I think what you're saying is extremely biblical.
It,
You go
it is.
back to the parable of the guy that buries the coins, and then the guy that goes and makes a lot of money with it and comes back with that. Who you going to have work for you? You
Who
know,
heard
and
who heard the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant"?
yes, yes, and those that do well get more.
All right.
And so you can't go bury it. You can't, when I think of wealth management, if you're not growing that for that family, you don't need to have those funds. You need to, and frankly, I'm pretty big on that needs to be in excess of 10% a year, you know, and it needs to be good growth and it needs to continue, and I look at it on bank stock too. At this point, all bank stocks are down. Our bank stock is down. It's not where I'd like it to be. Uh, and so what that's another thing that I feel that I take on, I wear. My stockholders deserve a better price. Yes, the market decides on that, but ultimately earnings will dictate price.
Yes.
And
Right.
so my job is to make sure the earnings are good, and that way the stock price will follow it. And we'd had 36 years of increased earnings, and then we had 2023. Our earnings went down $35 million. I was not a happy camper, but rates went up so fast, and the highest they've ever been. As far as faster and higher than historically, none of us ever expected that. Yes, our depository rates went up faster than our loans in our bond portfolio, and so yes, our earnings went down. Was I happy? No, not at all. Yeah, could I have mitigated some of that? Yes, I could have. Could have done a better job, and so I learned a lot from that. Um, and learned that those things do happen, but you pivot. The next year, we were back up and have been up since then. And, but, those things happen in business. But the more prepared you are for things like that, and you're thinking, hey, what if this does happen? And you got your balance sheet in shape to do that. Um, you know, so anyway, it's, again, I feel that fiduciary duty that our stock price isn't where it is for our stockholders.
Well, some of what I'm hearing there, Scott, is the humility of learning a lesson. We hope that we're prepared and we've thought through everything. COVID taught us that's not the case. The rate environment 3 years ago and the changes there caught lots and lots of people by surprise. Many of us had modeled what would happen if that happened, but didn't expect it to happen. And so the mitigating, well, the humility of, okay, now what do we learn so we don't repeat that, and let's keep
That's right.
keep on with that.
You learn every day. And I don't care how long you've been
That's
in the
true.
banking industry, you're still
That's
learning.
that's true. So let's talk about my view, leadership at the board level is very different than executive management, direct operational oversight of the business. They have a governance oversight responsibility. They're in a different lane, and it's not very helpful if they get in management's operational
Right.
leadership lane.
Very
So
true.
what does stewardship look like for a board and for directors on a board?
And I would say that is extremely important. Too many banks have the good old boy board, and that doesn't work. You have to have a professional board, and you can't have too many members. sometimes they have too many members, and you can't make decisions with too many members. I think 12 to 15 is about the right size for a board. We have 13 today. All our members on our board are very professional. They bring a tool set to the meetings, and different tool sets, from CPAs to attorneys to marketing people to investors, to you name it. They bring something to the table. They're all successful businessmen and women, and they're not bashful, and they're going to tell you,
That's good.
when they think, and so it's it's good. It's good, and it's good to have some. I wouldn't say controversy. I'd say difference of opinions.
Hmm.
Uh, and I'm always one that, whether it's loan committee or what, I don't want winners and losers. I don't ever, in a board meeting, you have to vote.
Right.
But I want it to be consensus before we take a vote, that everybody says, I can live with that.
Hmm.
And you talk through it and get to a consensus, and then you vote.
Hmm.
Uh, in the loan meetings I ran, in our management meeting, we don't vote. We just get to consensus, and everybody goes, "Hey, we can live with that," and we figure that out. That way, you don't have winners and losers, because you got people on different sides, and if they
Right.
can come together and decide on how it would work better, and that's why I love boards. I love loan committees. I love a management committee, because you get all those minds in one room, and people are thinking about it differently and come to the
Yes.
table with better solutions.
Yes. So it's interesting. You said we want to end up with consensus, but you said we also want to have controversy. I forget the words you
Mhm.
used, but
Yes, we have to put the difference of opinions out there,
yes.
and then decide on what's best.
So
And
go ahead.
and that's what you just talk through it. You
Which
know, uh,
which means you as the chairman, you when you were in the CEO, you shouldn't dominate the discussion where other voices wouldn't be heard.
and many times I didn't get my way.
Yes.
you know,
Right.
because they came up with a better solution than I thought. And
Hmm.
so, that's the value of having different people at the table, and
Yes.
having professional people at the table that can help make those decisions.
If there's space for them to have a voice, if they will use their voice, and if people will take time to listen. I'm a big fan of Peter Drucker, and recently in a
Yes.
conversation with a client, we were talking about his effective executive book under the chapter about making decisions. And he said, I don't believe in consensus. He said, start with disagreement. Make sure, if you don't start with people raising all the issues and the concerns and the contingencies and the possibilities and the annoyances, if you don't start there and you rush to consensus, this is my very bad paraphrase,
Hmm.
you're not going to make a good decision, because you will not have taken into consideration all those other factors that were creating unease and controversy on the front end. I love
Hmm.
that. You still
Hmm.
are progressing towards, we need to be in agreement to march forward, but let's start by figuring out where do we disagree and why, and let's not pretend like we don't.
Hmm. And I agree with Drucker, is that you don't rush to consensus. Sometimes I literally will say, okay, let's all let's all sleep on this,
Right. Yep.
and let's talk about it tomorrow. There's something about waiting, and all night long. Sometimes I
Yep.
dream about our decision. I mean,
Right.
that's how much it's on my mind. And
Yes.
and then we come back, and everybody has, yeah, we need to do that, or no, we don't need to do that.
Well, oftentimes it will show up for me with the faraway look at supper when my bride knows I'm not thinking about her, but I'm chewing on a work issue,
Hmm.
because the
Hmm.
we still need to process on it.
Yeah.
I'm involved right now on a pastor search committee at our church, and I've
Oh, bless
experienced
you.
firsthand and recently the benefit of having multiple voices on there. I'll come into the meeting with some ideas, and they're good, But we always end up at a better place because people will bring up things I hadn't thought about. I'll bring up something, they'll say, we need to know that wouldn't work because, and I hadn't thought about it. Committees can get a bad, boards can get a bad reputation for just being good old boys. But when they're effective, the outcome can be strong and something that can help us steward well.
Well, I've done a really bad job in that job, and I've done a really good job in that job. So,
Well, there you go.
but that other side is life too, because
Right.
you never know what somebody's going to be like till they're on the job. And they can be somebody else in an interview
Right.
and be totally different at the job.
That's true. And then again, the humility of recognizing it and, okay, what can we learn from it? So I can at least change my ratio of doing it well and not.
Don't want to do that again.
Yeah. Well, there's lots here for all of us as steward leaders to be thinking about. Scott, so grateful you took time for this. And listeners, hang on. We'll be back with another episode. You won't want to miss that either.
Eric, just appreciate the time.
Grateful for you. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Steward Leaders. If this conversation was helpful, you can find more episodes and additional resources at stewardleaderspodcast.com. Leadership is temporary. Stewardship is about forever.